A flight attendant suddenly leaned down close to my seat, pretending to check my boarding pass, then whispered into my ear quiet enough that no one else could hear. "Pretend to be sick, and get off this flight. Right now." In that moment, my heart nearly stopped. Just a few rows away sat my son and daughter-in-law. They were the ones who had bought my ticket, packed my luggage, carefully prepared snacks for me, and smiled as they walked me through every security checkpoint. I froze. Was this some kind of joke? Or was the woman in that uniform trying to save my life? I had 30 seconds to decide. 30 seconds to choose between my own family and a complete stranger. I don't know why, but something in instinct made me stand up. I clutched my chest, pretended I couldn't breathe, and staggered into the aisle. I chose to trust that stranger in the flight attendant's uniform. 20 minutes later, in a small windowless room behind the boarding gate, I finally learned why she had risked everything broken, every rule to pull me off that flight. My name is Howard Ellison. I'm 71 years old. I live in the Claremont neighborhood of San Diego, and for 40 years I taught high school chemistry. 40 years of lab notebooks, of telling teenagers the same 3 commandments: record everything, trust the data, and never assume, verify. I was in my study that afternoon, going through old lab journals I couldn't bring myself to throw away, when I heard the front door open downstairs. My son Nathan and his wife Paige had been living with me for 8 months, rent-free, question-free, and warmth-free. We moved past each other in the kitchen like polite ghosts. Nods, weather remarks, nothing. So when I heard both sets of footsteps coming up the stairs together, deliberate, my shoulders tensed before my brain knew why. Paige appeared in my doorway first, Nathan behind her with his hands buried in his pockets, his eyes finding my bookshelf, my window, the floor, everything but my face. "Howard," Paige said, in a voice frosted with artificial sweetness, "we need to talk." I took off my reading glasses slowly. 40 years of difficult students taught me that small gesture buys you 3 seconds of thinking time. Nathan cleared his throat and said, "We've been thinking about family, Dad, about spending real time together, before life gets busy." "Before what, exactly?" I asked. And Paige waved her hand like she was clearing smoke and said, "Nathan, tell him about Hawaii." My son finally looked at me, and what I saw was desperation wearing a costume of enthusiasm. "Dad, remember Honolulu, when I was 11? Let's do it again, a full week. Our treat. Everything's paid." I set my pen down very carefully and said, "Nathan, you got seasick on that trip. You cried at the aquarium. You begged to fly home early." His smile flickered like a bad bulb. "I was a kid," he said. "I see things differently now." The silence stretched, and I studied them both, the boy who once brought me dandelions in a jelly jar, and the woman perched uninvited on the arm of my reading chair like she was appraising it. Something had shifted in this house, and I couldn't date the shift. Was it when Nathan lost his job? When the credit card calls started? Or had it been slow, a titration, one drop at a time, until the whole solution changed color? "When would this trip be?" I asked. "Next week," Paige said too fast. "Everything's arranged. We just need your yes." That evening, Paige cooked dinner. Paige never cooks. I sat at my own dining table while she moved through my kitchen with an ownership that made my skin prickle, and Nathan poured wine with hands that weren't quite steady. "So this was planned without me," I said, accepting the glass. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Nathan said. "A good one." Paige set my plate down with clinical precision. She'd spent 15 years as a records coordinator at Torrey Mesa Medical, and that efficiency lived in everything she touched. And then, between one bite and the next, she said it. "Howard, your life insurance is quite substantial, isn't it? 650,000. Very responsible of you." My fork stopped in the air. "How do you know that number?" "Nathan mentioned it once," she said lightly, slicing her chicken into perfect, identical pieces. "Just conversation." I looked at my son. He was studying his plate like it contained the answers to a final exam. And a cold, quiet voice in the back of my head, the voice that grades lab reports, said, "That data point does not belong in this experiment." So I ran a test. "I haven't been sleeping well," I said. "My heart does something strange at night. A flutter." And I watched. For one unguarded fraction of a second, my son's eyes lit up. Lit up. Then he caught himself and said, "You should see a doctor." And Paige cut across him, smooth as glass. "Nathan worries too much. You look fine, Howard." It's probably stress, and their eyes met over the table for half a heartbeat. Just half. But I'd spent 4 decades catching students exchange glances over test papers. I know what a shared answer looks like. After they went downstairs, I found the flight confirmations on the counter. Already booked. My seat already paid for. They had been certain of my yes before they'd asked the question. I sat in my study past midnight, holding a photograph of Nathan at 7 gap-toothed, sunburned, arms around my neck like I was the safest structure on earth, and I let myself feel it all the way down. Then I put the photo away, because 40 years of chemistry had taught me one law that never fails. Every reaction leaves residue. People leave evidence. Always. And by morning, I had made my decision in the dark. I would go to Hawaii. I would observe. I would document. When Nathan knocked at 7 with a smile too bright for the hour and asked, "So, Dad, Hawaii?" I said, "I'll go," and watched relief flood his face, chased by something else. Not love, anticipation. Behind him, Paige gave a nod so small it was almost subliminal. They thought they'd won. Let them. I packed that morning with method shirts, socks, my medication bottles, and then I paused over those bottles, hearing Paige's voice in my head. "You look fine, Howard." My hands moved on their own, and put every medication into my carry-on instead of the checked bag. A small precaution. The kind that looks paranoid. Right up until the moment it doesn't. The drive to the airport told its own story, for anyone keeping a notebook. Nathan claimed the trunk was full, so my suitcase rode on my lap, but I'd seen inside that trunk, and it was nearly empty. He gripped the wheel until his knuckles went white. Paige typed messages and deleted the threads immediately after sending, her face wearing the blank, calculating stillness I'd come to think of as her working expression. "Excited for the islands, Dad?" Nathan asked, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Should I be?" I said. He missed it completely. We passed the strip mall where I bought him his first bicycle, the library where we spent 100 Saturdays, the school where I taught for 3 decades. And every block, the pressure in my chest grew. Not cardiac. Instinct. At the airport, Nathan parked in short term for a week-long trip, and Paige steered me through security first, her hand firm on my shoulder, and I watched her watch the scanner as my carry-on went through. She leaned in, checked something on that screen, and relaxed only when the bag came out the other side. "See? Easy," she said. Her relief was 3 sizes too big for the moment. At the gate, their tickets boarded in Zone 1 and mine in Zone 3, and they vanished down the jetway without a backward glance, leaving me among strangers with my suitcase handle biting into my palm. If you've ever stood in a crowd and realized the people who are supposed to be yours have already stopped looking back for you, you know it isn't loneliness. It's information. When my zone was called, I walked that jetway slowly, feeling the strange finality of it, that tilted tunnel between solid ground and a sealed tube, and stepped into the recycled air of the aircraft. And that's when a flight attendant angled toward me. Her name tag said Renata. Her smile was standard issue professional, until she leaned close, pretending to check my boarding pass, and her breath touched my ear. "Act sick, and get off this plane." Then she was gone, smiling down the aisle, closing overhead bins. I stood frozen between rows, my heart doing the flutter I'd only invented 2 nights before. 11 rows ahead, Nathan and Paige sat buried in their phones. Was this a prank? A drill? Some new protocol? I took one more step toward my seat, and Renata materialized again, and this time the professional mask had cracked straight through. Her fingers closed on my sleeve. They were trembling. "Sir," she whispered, "I am begging you, get off this plane, now." I looked into her eyes, and I want to describe exactly what I found there, because it decided everything. Not concern, not confusion, terror. The specific terror of a person who knows a specific thing. 40 years of reading faces across a classroom, separating the kid who forgot his homework from the kid whose house isn't safe. It all fired at once. "You're serious," I said quietly. She said, "I have never been more serious in my life." And from up the aisle came my son's voice. "Dad? Everything okay?" With an edge in it that was not concern. I made the decision the way you pull your hand off a hot beaker. No deliberation. Pure reflex. My hand went to my chest, fingers splayed, and I said, "My chest, I can't," and let my knee hit the aisle floor. The fear in my voice was real. Only the symptom was manufactured. The cabin erupted into professional crisis. "Sir, can you breathe, sir? Stay with us, hands under my arms." A wheelchair summoned, voices overlapping. And through all of it, I kept my eyes working. Because here is the moment I will carry to my grave. I looked up the aisle at my son and his wife, and before their masks slammed into place, before they assembled their faces into worry for the audience around them, I saw it. Disappointment. Undisguised, unmistakable disappointment, the look of two people watching a result fail to precipitate. Then Nathan rose, half aggressive before he softened it into the worried son, calling, "Dad, what's wrong? Should we come with you?" And a crew member blocked the aisle. "No, stay seated. Medical is standing by." And as they wheeled me backward up the jetway, I heard Paige's voice, low, meant only for Nathan, but carrying in that post-crisis hush. "This ruins everything." And my son hissed back, "Not here." I want to pause the story right there, one breath, because some of you have lived a version of this moment. If you have ever caught, in a face you love, one flash of the wrong emotion relief where there should be grief, irritation where there should be fear, and then watched it vanish so fast you told yourself you imagined it. You didn't imagine it. The flash is the truth. Everything after the flash is the performance. They parked me in the medical bay, where a paramedic pronounced my vitals, excellent, probably anxiety, and left me alone on crinkling paper. Through the little window I watched my flight push back, taxi, and lift my son into a clean blue sky, carrying him toward a vacation whose main event had just walked off the plane. My phone buzzed. "Nathan, Dad, hope you feel better. We'll call when we land." Then again, then a third time, I powered it off, and the door opened. Renata came in still wearing her uniform, but off shift now, her face gray, and she checked the hallway twice before she closed the door. "What I'm about to show you could end my career," she said. "But I couldn't live with the alternative." She pulled out her phone with unsteady fingers and opened a video. "I recorded this in the restroom by the gate, before boarding," she said. "It's your daughter-in-law." The screen showed ceiling tiles and fluorescent glare. She'd been in the next stall, but the audio came through the echo of tile with terrible clarity. Paige's voice. Calm. Organized. Clinical. "The capsules dissolve in under a minute. He won't taste anything in a Mai Tai." A pause. Someone talking on the other end. "Cardiac events at altitude read as natural. Diversion takes an hour minimum. By the time anyone competent examines him, the window's closed." Another pause. Then, lighter, almost bored, 650. "Nathan's nervous, but he's committed." And then my daughter-in-law laughed. She laughed. I watched that video 3 times, and each viewing peeled back another layer: the dosage math, the timeline, the profit margin calculated on my heartbeat. My voice came out steadier than it had any right to be. Who was she talking to? "I don't know," Renata said, "but she said the plan was in motion, and that your son was on board with it." Those were her words. On board. I looked at this stranger who had just torn up her own career to save my life, and I asked her the only question that mattered. Why? Why risk everything for a man you've never met? And something old and raw moved across her face. "My grandmother," she said. 3 years ago. My aunt talked her into changing the will. 2 months later she was gone, and the coroner called it natural, and I knew, and I could prove nothing. Her jaw hardened. "I have been silent once in my life, Mr. Ellison. Never again." I wrote her number into the little notebook I've carried since 1985, teacher's habit, print clearly, date everything, and we shook hands, and hers finally stopped shaking. "Stop them," she said. That was her whole goodbye. The taxi home took 35 minutes through neighborhoods I'd known for half a century, and the driver asked if I'd missed my flight. "No," I told the window. "I caught something." My house looked the same from the curb, the colonial, the garden I'd kept for 30 years, but when I unlocked my own front door, it felt contaminated. Every room now had a second history. The plan had been discussed at that table, refined in those bedrooms, seasoned into that dinner. I went straight to my study, pulled 4 decades of files, and spread my life across the dining table in chronological order: insurance, banking, deeds, legal, a chain of custody for my own existence. Lab method, applied to survival. Hours passed. Dusk, darkness, reading glasses. Good light. And then I found it. The beneficiary form on my life insurance, dated 7 months back, moving the policy from my niece in Portland, the girl who put herself through pharmacy school on double shifts to Nathan Ellison. The signature at the bottom was a decent forgery of mine, except the capital H, too ornate. A flourish I have never once made in 71 years. I photographed it. Then I kept digging, and the floor kept dropping. Bank statements showing transfers. I never authorized $41,000 over 6 months, siphoned in doses small enough to pass unnoticed. A power of attorney granting Nathan financial authority, signed in my forged hand. And then the worst folder of all. Medical records I had never seen, from appointments I had never attended, documenting a cognitive decline I have never experienced. Memory lapses, disorientation, progressive impairment, all fiction, all formatted perfectly. All stamped through systems my daughter-in-law had spent 15 years learning to operate. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They had spent months erasing me, first building a paper version of Howard Ellison whose mind was already gone, so that his death would read as a sad inevitability, and his signature would mean nothing if he ever objected. I stood alone in my dining room at midnight and said it out loud, because saying it made it data. They planned this for months, while living in my house, eating at this table. And I felt the shock burn off like solvent, leaving behind something with a much higher boiling point. Cold, concentrated, stable. They didn't know about the recording. They didn't know I'd found the paper. They didn't know the sample they'd been studying, had started studying them back. 3 days later, Miriam Vance sat across my desk, 20 years in elder law, silver-streaked hair, a handshake like a verdict, and watched her professional composure crack folder by folder. Forged beneficiary, fraudulent power of attorney, fabricated dementia. When she reached the medical records, she looked up and said, "Your daughter-in-law works in patient records?" "Tori Mesa," I said. 15 years. Templates, systems, physician stamps. Miriam exhaled slowly. "She manufactured your incompetence, while you were teaching a night class in stoichiometry. Then I did something I won't pretend was ethically tidy. I handed her Nathan's laptop. He'd left it in his room, and I'd set up his passwords myself years ago, and he'd never changed them." Miriam looked at me for a long moment, then plugged in a recovery drive. Deleted emails rose from the dead in rows, a correspondence with someone styling himself a wellness consultant. Discussion of a compound that stresses the heart and vanishes from a standard talk screen, especially effective, one message noted, at altitude. A negotiated price. $12,000 for consultation and supply. A meeting in a parking structure downtown. Miriam read in silence, and when she finally spoke, her voice was flat. "Howard, your son priced your death like a used car." The words should have destroyed me. They didn't. I'd already burned through that fuel over 3 sleepless nights and come out the other side into a colder atmosphere. "Keep scrolling," I said. "There's a will." And there was a draft on his desktop, leaving everything to Nathan and Paige Ellison, my signature forged at the bottom, dated for a future they were confident I wouldn't see. Miriam took off her glasses, rubbed her eyes, and asked me the question that shaped everything after. "When this is over, do you want justice or revenge?" And I didn't hesitate, because I'd already graded that question in the dark. "I want them to understand what they did," I said, "and I want consequences that outlive the apology." She nodded slowly. "Then we build it airtight first, and we let them keep digging." 1 week, she said. Protective orders, freezes, revocations, all with delayed notice. Act normal. And Howard, she paused at the door, "they're going to panic when the locks engage." "Good," I said. "Panicked people make mistakes." That night, Nathan texted, "Dad, dinner soon? We need to talk about your future." I typed back 6 words. "Yes, we should discuss the future." He read it as surrender. I meant it as a syllabus. What followed was the strangest performance of my life, and I gave it everything. For 2 weeks I played the man their forged records described. I let coffee go cold while staring at it. I asked which pills were mine while a camera above the refrigerator recorded Paige's satisfied little smile as she handed them over. "Thank you, dear. I don't know what I'd do without you both." 12 security cameras, installed by a legitimate company at my request, with full audio. And here's the part I still savor. Nathan and Paige approved them enthusiastically. "For your safety, Dad." Smart thinking. They never read the specifications. Never realized every whispered conference in my living room was streaming to a cloud account only I could open. And I added one enhancement of my own, a small recorder tucked into the heating vent above the dining room, the same trick I once used to catch a cheating ring whispering answers during finals. Old teacher tricks. New stakes. It paid out within 48 hours. Late at night, through my headphones, Paige's voice, tight with fury. The flight was supposed to settle this, now we're at 0. And Nathan, you said the capsules were undetectable. And Paige, dropping into that flat clinical register that frightens me more than shouting ever could. Then we go to plan B, the incompetency route. Look at him lately. He's already halfway gone. I lay in the dark one floor above them, expressionless, recording, and I thought not with anger. With something quieter, you're not watching me decline. You're watching me aim. The most dangerous work happened deeper in the night. Cloning drives from Nathan's laptop while he slept, an external disk filling with evidence, and one close call at 88% when footsteps creaked in the hall. And I slipped out through the connecting bathroom with the drive in my pocket, and my pulse hammering against 40 years of practiced calm. Meanwhile, in daylight, I built the legal fortress. A new will legitimate, bulletproof, executed before a notary named Elena Ruiz, who read every clause aloud, videotaped my declaration, took fingerprints, and asked me straight, "Your son inherits nothing?" "My son negotiated a price for my death," I told her, clear-eyed. "He'll receive exactly what he paid for me. Everything goes to the Lantern Scholars Fund laboratory scholarships for first-generation science students." She added extra witnesses without being asked and said quietly, "I've seen this before. Families who see an old man as a vacancy instead of a person." And Miriam handed me a burner phone in a parking structure if they escalate physically. One button, police are pre-briefed, and I pocketed it hoping I'd never need it, and knowing I might. The freeze engaged on a Tuesday morning. I sat at the breakfast table behind a newspaper I wasn't reading, counting to 60 wait, let the reaction develop while upstairs my son's computer chimed and his voice went sharp. "Paige, get up here, now." Error messages multiplied on his screen all morning. "Access denied. Account locked. Please appear in person." I filmed it from the hallway, unnoticed. His call to the bank curdled from confident to pleading, and when he hung up, his face was ash. "All third-party access suspended," he said to Paige, "pending a fraud investigation." That evening I cooked a pot roast, the good one, low and slow, the way I learned after retirement, and served it to my would-be killers with steady hands. "And somewhere between the carrots and the silence," I said, conversationally. "Strange thing today. The bank called about unusual activity on my accounts. Unauthorized transfers, apparently. I asked them to investigate thoroughly." Nathan choked on his water. Paige's fork stopped mid-air, one tremor, quickly mastered, and then she pushed back with the only tool she had left. "Howard, this is exactly why you need oversight. You're clearly confused." "Oversight," I repeated, tasting the word. "Interesting choice. Legal oversight. Medical?" She leaned in. "For your own protection." And I asked mildly, "Protection from what? Exactly from whom?" The silence answered for both of them. Later, drying dishes, Nathan hovered, "Maybe I should come to the bank with you, Dad, help explain the account management," and I smiled gently and said, "That's kind, but I can handle my own finances. I'm not incompetent. Yet." The word hung between us like a dropped beaker. I watched my son's eyes search my face. Does he know? How much does he know? And I turned back to the dishes and left him suspended in the not knowing. That night, the living room camera caught their war council in crystal audio. Paige pacing, "We need medical power of attorney. I know people at Torrey Mesa who owe favors, who need money. We get him declared unfit. We become guardians, and guardians control everything, including whether this investigation continues." And my son, my dandelion boy, nodded along, doing arithmetic. "Honestly, if that were you watching your own child on that screen, I don't know how you'd sleep. I'll tell you how I did." I opened my old teaching journal and wrote one line. "Sometimes the only way to teach the final lesson is to let the students fail the exam they wrote themselves." Then I slept like a stone. The fake doctor called 2 mornings later. A pleasant voice claiming to be Dr. Calloway, my family physician. Fascinating, since I don't have one inviting me to a routine cognitive assessment that afternoon. "Of course," I said warmly. "I appreciate such thorough care." Then I called Miriam, who ran the name and came back in 90 seconds. "No such license in the state of California." So I kept the appointment recorder in my shirt pocket, police on standby, and found exactly what I expected. A shared medical building, a suite with a printed paper sign taped up overnight, and a stranger with rented credentials, asking questions engineered to make any answer sound impaired. I performed mild confusion, recorded every syllable, and drove the next morning to the genuine article, Dr. Anika Rao, 30 years of forensic psychiatry, an office smelling of leather and lavender who put me through pattern batteries and memory drills and executive function gauntlets, watching not just my answers but my method, and set down her pen and said, "Mr. Ellison, your cognition rivals people half your age, fully competent. No decline, no paranoia, no delusion." I drove home with her preliminary report on the seat beside me, feeling the trap click one tooth tighter, and found Nathan's car blocking my driveway. My son stood on the porch holding a manila envelope, wearing the desperate resolve of a student caught cheating who's decided to bluff the appeal. His hand shook as he pushed the papers at me. "Dad, this is for your own good. You're not well." I read every page right there in the driveway while he shifted his weight and stared at the hedge. Petition for guardianship. Paranoid delusions regarding family. Progressive memory loss. Financial incompetence. A danger to himself. Sworn witness statements attached. A detailed psychiatric report from a doctor, Monica Hale of Torrey Mesa, a physician I have never met in my life. I looked up at my boy and asked him one quiet question. "Whose safety is this for, Nathan? Mine or yours?" He fled to his car without answering. That evening, I went door to door with my teaching journal, gentle as I'd ever been with a struggling student, and the witness statements dissolved one by one. Mrs. Delgado wept on her porch. "Nathan said it was paperwork to help with your care. I saw you in the yard at night, that's all." "At 11 p.m., I said softly, checking my new security cameras. In shorts and a t-shirt, he showed you what he needed you to see. She promised to recant. So did 2 others. 3 more wouldn't open their doors. And I learned later my son had paid them. 500 here, 300 there. Testimony bought at struggling neighbor prices. At the preliminary hearing, Judge Feldman read both filings with visible skepticism and ordered an independent court-appointed evaluation, to be conducted by Dr. Anika Rao. Miriam and I did not look at each other. We didn't dare. Afterward, she wanted to file everything immediately. Attempted murder, forgery, all of it. End this now, and I shook my head. Not yet. If we strike now, they lawyer up and stop producing evidence. Students reveal the most when they believe they're passing. Let them keep writing their confession, one crime at a time. She warned me it was risky. I told her I'd spent 40 years watching cheaters double down, and not one of them ever quit while they thought they were ahead. Dr. Rao's court report landed like a verdict before the verdict. Full capacity, superior analytical function, petition recommended for denial. And that same afternoon, in Miriam's conference room, we assembled the whole machine, a 52-page counterfiling detailing 19 criminal acts, a 25-page criminal complaint, 2 boxes of exhibits, color-coded, cross-referenced, chronological, a curriculum of crimes. "We file everything," Miriam said. "Everything," I agreed. I watched from a bench in the clerk's office as the paperwork moved clerk to supervisor, supervisor to phone, phone to judge's chambers, and emergency hearings bloomed on the calendar within hours. That afternoon, a process server rang my own doorbell while I filmed from across the street. Paige answered. He handed her the envelope, and I watched through my zoom lens as her face performed its last honest sequence: shock, recognition, fear, before she shouted for Nathan, and their argument played in silhouette against my living room curtains. The server's official report, later entered into evidence, preserved her exact words. "You told me he was too old to put it together. You promised me." That night my cameras recorded the frenzy Nathan mass-deleting files, emptying trash folders, attempting a drive wipe with the fumbling urgency of a man who learned computers from the son of a chemistry teacher, and Paige feeding documents into the shredder until it overheated and jammed, then tearing pages by hand. Miriam called, watching the same feed. "Every deletion is a new charge," she said. "Obstruction, consciousness of guilt. They're manufacturing their own exhibits now. The settlement offer arrived within 36 hours. Return the 41,000, vacate immediately, waive all inheritance, accept a restraining order in exchange for dropping every criminal charge. I read it at the dining table where all of this began. They researched what stops a heart, I told Miriam. They priced it. They booked the flight. This is not a billing dispute. Schedule the trial. Public, jury, record. And when a second offer came weeks later, $100,000, hand-delivered by Paige's mortified sister, with the word mistakes in the first sentence, I uncapped my pen and wrote one line across it in the same handwriting that graded 30,000 lab reports. Justice is not for sale. See you in court. Renata called that evening, and when I asked if she was ready to testify publicly, her answer came without a single breath of hesitation. My grandmother never got her day, she said. Yours is going to count for both of them. Their world came apart with the dull thoroughness of erosion. Nathan's gambling ledger went public through the filings, 88,000 across sportsbooks, card rooms, and a crypto margin account, and the collectors, discovering he would inherit nothing, escalated from calls to workplace visits. His car went back on a truck. Paige's employer opened its own investigation, found her fingerprints all over unauthorized record access and fabricated documents, and ended 15 years of career in a 15-minute meeting with a security escort and a confiscated badge, while former colleagues watched through glass. The state board scheduled a revocation hearing. Their new apartment had thin walls, and the neighbors heard everything. This is your fault, your debts, your weakness. My weakness? You wanted him dead. I wanted the money. You wanted the method. And then, one night, the sentence that summarized their entire marriage. Now we have nothing but each other. And her laugh bitter, airless. That's the worst part. 2 of the paid witnesses came to Miriam's office to recant, and one old man on a fixed income looked me in the eye and said, he told me the signatures were formalities. But murder isn't paperwork. Tell the truth completely, I said. That's the whole assignment. The night before trial, I stood in my study before the evidence wall, photographs, documents, dates, string, and I took down one item that was never evidence at all. Nathan at 8 years old, gap-toothed, holding a jar of dandelions. I let myself grieve for exactly as long as the photograph deserved for the boy who was real, for the man who chose not to be, and then I wrote 3 sentences on the back, sealed it in an envelope addressed to my son, for delivery after the verdict. I gave you everything I had. You chose this. Now we both live in the result. Then I laid out my suit, my quietest tie, my polished shoes, and I slept. The trial is the part I'll slow down for, because you've earned it. The courtroom filled early media in the back rows, because the story had leaked, and a plane makes everything news. Nathan and Paige sat with their attorney looking like exhibits of themselves, already diminished. The prosecutor's opening was surgical. The defendants planned the murder of Howard Ellison for insurance money, researched the method, procured the substance, forged the paperwork, and boarded the aircraft. And the only reason the victim is in this courtroom instead of a coroner's report is a flight attendant with a conscience and a cell phone. Then the lights dimmed, and Renata's recording played through the courtroom speakers, and I watched 12 jurors hear my daughter-in-law's calm, organized voice price my heartbeat at $650,000 and laugh. Nathan flinched at the laugh. Paige stared at a fixed point on the wall, jaw locked, and did not move for the entire 90 seconds. No one in that room breathed. Renata took the stand, and her voice shook for exactly 4 questions before it found its footing and never lost it again. I heard her plan a man's death like a work schedule, she said. I recorded it because 3 years ago I stayed quiet, and I buried my grandmother wondering. The defense went after her finances on cross. Isn't it true you have debts of your own? And she leaned into the microphone and delivered the single best sentence of the trial. My situation is exactly why I recognize desperation. And I still didn't let it turn me into an accomplice. The document examiner dismantled the forged H in my signature under 400x magnification. The bank walked the jury through $41,000 of quiet theft, transfer by transfer. Dr. Rao testified to a mind with no decline, deleting the incompetency narrative in 11 minutes. The recovered emails scrolled across the courtroom screen. Dissolve time, talk screens, altitude, $12,000 while my son studied his own hands. And then I took the stand. When did you first suspect? The prosecutor asked. When the invitation came, I said. 8 months of silence, then a paid vacation with a deadline. In my classroom, we called that an anomalous result. And anomalous results get investigated. And what did you do? Exactly what I taught teenagers to do for 40 years. Record everything. Trust the data. Verify before concluding. I just never imagined the experiment would be my own family. The defense's cross lasted 6 minutes and improved my credibility. The jury was out for under 2 hours. Guilty conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty fraud. Guilty forgery. Guilty, 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 down the list, each word landing on Nathan like weather, until his head was in his hands, and one tear escaped Page's composure and was erased with one knuckle. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wished to speak, and I stood, and I faced them, and I kept it to 5 sentences, because 40 years of teaching taught me that brevity is what people remember. You lived under my roof. You ate at my table. You answered my trust with a dosage calculation. I don't hate you, I grieve you. You traded your whole lives for money you will never touch, and that arithmetic is a life sentence no judge needs to add to. Nathan received years of strict probation, a permanent felony record, and full restitution plus punitive damages. Paige received more, her professional license revoked, her credentials flagged forever, her career unrecoverable, permanent restraining orders, every inheritance right extinguished. The judge's closing line went into the transcript and into me. This was not a lapse. This was a project. Your victim's dignity is the only mercy in this courtroom. Outside, on the steps, I gave the cameras 19 words about trust being sacred and consequences being real, and I declined the rest. In the parking structure, I saw my son one last time, slipping out a side exit, head down. Our eyes met for a second and a half. He looked away first, and I felt completion, not victory, not warmth. The specific quiet of a ledger that finally balances. Here's what this story taught me, and I want to hand it to you plainly, because the lesson is the reason I tell it. The mistake most people make is believing that being loved and being seen are the same thing. They're not. Paige counted on it. She knew that a father will explain away almost anything to keep his picture of his child intact, and that denial is the most reliable accomplice in the world. What saved my life wasn't luck. It was one stranger who refused to stay silent. And 40 years of a habit anyone can start today. So start it today. This week, pull your own file, call your insurance company, and ask them to read you your current beneficiaries out loud, then ask them to flag the policy so any change requires direct verbal confirmation with you. 10 minutes. Most people haven't checked in a decade, and the people who change it are counting on that. Then sit with the harder question, the one I still sit with in my study some nights. Of the people closest to you, who knows more about what your death is worth than about how your day was? Take your time with that one. I did. And now it's your turn, because I've argued my own choices for 2 years. Put a 1 inch the comments if you think I was right to go home and build the case in silence, letting them incriminate themselves for months. Put a 2 if you think I should have taken Renata's recording straight to the police that same afternoon, before they took one more breath as free people. Put a 3 if you believe I owed my son one face-to-face confrontation, father to child, before the law ever got involved, because I'll be honest with you. On certain nights I still wonder. Tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is there. These stories travel further than I ever imagined, and it moves me every single time. And if a stranger has ever protected you when your own people wouldn't, or if you've ever caught that one wrong flash in a familiar face, tell me about it below. Somebody reading tonight is sitting at a dinner table where the numbers don't add up, and they need to know they're not paranoid. They're paying attention. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and stay a while. I have a lifetime of them, and this little corner of the internet exists because people like you choose to come back. Thank you truly for sitting with me tonight. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in San Diego, California to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.